for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the top. Pull together till the Grey Cups won. Go Argos, go, go, go! Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go! Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe! Scoring touchdowns for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the top. Pull together till the Grey Cups won. Go Argos, go Toronto, go! Go Argos, go, go, go!
Oops. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of the Argo Bounce Live audio show, and that's our new opening song, courtesy of YouTube and the Toronto Argonauts. And I thought it was great to have an opening song for the Toronto Argonauts. And guess what? I'm looking forward to the game tomorrow night against Calgary Stampeders on Friday, August 25th at 7:30 at BMO Field. It's a C&E game as well. Unfortunately, I've got work commitments this weekend, so I'm not going to be able to attend that game. But my co-host Nick Small, who will be joining us, will be on here very soon. And let us know what you think of our new opening song for the Argo Bounce Live audio show, a weekly show about the CFL's Toronto Argonauts, breaking down and previewing their previous home and road games. And we'll look forward to talking to Nick tonight about the Calgary game and about the CNE experience as well. Good evening, Nick. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Chris, doing great. Really excited for a really fun Friday night at the CNE coming up tomorrow. It's always one of the landmark games of the Toronto Argonauts season, especially now that they move back to BMO Field. It's such a wonderful thing. You get into the CNE for free. That's $25 you would normally have to spend now to get in. And getting to go to an Argos game for as little as maybe if you take out that $25 to the CNE grounds, try all the crazy food, good to ride on the rides, shop at all the shops. There's always something for everyone there, and it always makes for a really fun experience. I got to jump the gun real quick because I've got to ask you. You had Jim Barker on your show, I think, on Tuesday. How was that?
Oh, I thought it was great. Jim talked to me for over an hour, and I pretty well could ask him a lot of things, and he was great. The guy, he came from the States and came to the Canadian Football League in 1996. And as you know, he joined the Alouettes in 96, and they had the best record in the league, and they lost to Flutie and the Argos. And then the next year, he joined the Argos in 97 as the offensive coordinator under the back-to-back Grey Cup champion Argonauts and Don Matthews. And great career, 5 Grey Cups is total. I think he has 3 as head coach, and then I think 1 as the GM and 1 as the senior advisor. But it was great to have Jim Barker on. And if you haven't watched or listened to our show, please check out my YouTube channel or all my audio platforms such as Apple, Google. And if you're a CFL fan and a Toronto Argonaut fan, check out my show with Jim Barker.
Yeah, Jim Barker, I think sometimes goes under the radar for what he did for the city and for this team in the Toronto Argonauts. I think sometimes you get guys like Pinball, no offense, stand out above him, but Jim Barker really did put his heart and soul into the time he was here for this team in the city for almost 2 decades, if you go all the way back. So he has just such an incredible record, and some of the things he did, like the 2012 season with bringing in Scott Milanovich and Ricky Ray, and how for the centennial it kind of worked into the absolute perfect miracle season for the Argonauts. And yeah, his role just last year leading to another Grey Cup. Yeah, there's not many negative things you can say about Jim Barker and his true commitment and passion for Canadian football. And to sort of, hearing you talk about it in the show the other day, just listening about those experiences and how amazing he is still, and the CFL game and trying to convince people that it is you can enjoy it just like the NFL.
Yeah, he also mentioned too. I asked him about this because he's done head coach and GM, and he said it's hard. You have to put 100+% in both, and not everyone can do it. And he goes, look at the teams that are struggling right now: Edmonton, Ottawa, Calgary. They got head coaches that are doing 2, 3 roles right now, and he just says it's just too much to do that. And I think I can't speak for him, but I think he thinks it's better for a franchise to have one head coach and one GM, and let the coach and the GM do their job as well, because it's a lot of commitment. It's a lot of work doing one job, but let alone 2 or 3 roles with an organization.
Yeah, Hamilton as well. But yeah, I think it's incredibly tough, and especially in a 9-team league where the turnaround is just so incredibly quick. You can be up at the top one year and then the very next be back down to rock bottom. We've seen that with the Argonauts. We've seen that with other teams, Hamilton, Ottawa now. It can happen in a blink. So it is an absolutely incredible incredibly challenging job, and to see people who are up to the challenge to try to attempt it is big. But yeah, to try to bring the tangible success, we saw Dave Dickinson do it in Calgary, or sorry, John Huffnagel before Dickinson do it in Calgary for such a long time, and then bringing Dickinson in as kind of the protege and the successor. And yeah, maybe right now it's not necessarily that it was one thing of poor coaching decisions, but it little things add up over time. And in another way, it's kind of rightful place maybe that Calgary's had its run at the top. It's time for it to kind of go down. We see win dynasty now 3-4 years, and we'll see what happens. Maybe it might go back to the bottom and somebody else, maybe Edmonton will resurrect itself and be right at the top the next 5 years. Who knows? And that's what makes football and sports as a whole fun, because nobody would like it if a team was the finalist for 10 years or 20 years in a row, right?
Yeah, and we have a special guest tonight. He's going to come on for a few minutes. His name is Ken Judge. He's the host of his own podcast show, Ken's Corner Podcast. Please check it out. It's on all platforms where podcasts are available. And he's also a fan of the Toronto Argonauts as well. So we're just going to bring on our special guest, Ken Judge. Good evening, Ken. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you? And nice to meet you, Nick.
Hey, nice to meet you as well. Welcome aboard. Really excited to have you with us as we talk a little bit about the Argos today and their impending matchup with Calgary tonight. Are you planning on going to the game by any chance?
Well, I was actually in Calgary the last game that we were facing them, and I was that close to going, but I just couldn't find someone to go with me that night. So I was actually kind of glad, but we did have that injury to Chad Kelly, so hopefully we have a little bit of redemption time in our sights tomorrow night.
Hey, Ken, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your podcast show, where they can listen to it and find it on? And also, how did you become a Toronto Argonauts fan as well?
Okay, well, I'll start with the Argonauts because I just love talking about the Argos. I've been a fan since I don't know how old I was. I actually played football for Pickering High School Trojans, and our coach was actually a former Argonaut player. So my love started, I guess, for around grade 9, so about 14 years old. I'm 56 now. And I like to say that I don't think I've missed a victory parade in the last since the 90s when Rocket Ismail caught that big touchdown in the end zone with that snowball coming at him. So, yeah, it's been a long time, and it's great to be on talking about the Argonauts. As far as Ken's Corner, you can find me most bestly actually on Facebook. I do have a good little following there, and I post all my episodes. I seem to be doing a lot of WWE style wrestlers. They're lots of fun to come on, but I enjoy having other people on. As Chris Pomay, actually, we have an episode that's going to be releasing here in shortly in the next day or two, Chris.
I think I found another guest for you too. If you ever want, I think my co-host Nick Small would make a good guest on your show as well, with his knowledge of the Toronto Argonauts, the love of the team, and his passion for the Canadian Football League.
Well, I am a little upset that he got your ticket, not me. But on the other note, Nick, I would love to have you on and have your knowledge being talked in front of my audience.
Yeah, I'd love to come on. I've always loved preaching the gospel of Toronto's most successful and greatest sports team. So I would absolutely love to come on. And yeah, if we can spend some time talking about it, especially with someone like yourself who has spent so many years following the team. In my position, I'm a history MA, so I have a big interest in learning about the history of the team. And I like to think I have a decent amount of knowledge, but I'm always trying to learn more and to hear it from people who actually saw some of the greats, like Rocket Ismail, for instance, guys like Tobin Road or um, uh, whoever. I'm blanking at the top of my head on the
Doug
at the
Flutie.
moment. Yeah, Doug Flutie, Joe Kroll, Dick Shadow. There's
Joe
a couple
Barnes.
more. Yeah, so there's all kinds of great guys, and it's really cool to share some of those stories and preach some more knowledge. What do you think about Chad Kelly so far? Is he maybe the best quarterback we've had since Flutie?
Well, he's starting to look like it. Let's hope that we can keep his injury list down, and keep him on that field. Once he's on that field, though, he's dynamic and probably the best in the CFL if you're asking me. But I mean, I am a little bit on the Argonaut side, so I don't see too many others as being as good as he is. But I mean, we are 7-1, and if you actually factor in the fact that he was injured in that Calgary game, he's actually 7-0. So. Yeah, I believe he's the best quarterback in the game, to answer your question, Nick.
Nick, or not Nick, but I was going to ask you, Ken, being a lifelong Argonaut fan, what are some of your favorite Argonaut moments and some of your favorite Grey Cup victories? And there's been 8 of them since 1983.
Yeah, it's hard to name the best of them, but I do remember big games from like I said, that Rocky Ismail catch in the end zone, I believe it was, and there was a snowball that came at him. I believe that's got to be one of my favorite moments. But I mean, the Doug Flutie era and a few other guys like Joe Barnes and Pinball Clemens. Like, come on, like so many moments from Pinball. This team just last year, I was jumping around with the 2 guys that I had here over for a beer watching that game and thought, oh my God, we're going to lose it in a kick. With that kick in the final seconds there, that block has got to go down as one of my favorite all-time moments, and it was just last season.
Absolutely, Nick. You have another question for Ken?
Yeah, for block that, especially after the moments before taking that penalty for the face mask that arguably could have cost them the game, and then for him to come back and make an even bigger play for them to win. I think that's what made it the most special and rewarding of it all, because it really epitomizes fighting through adversity and coming through when clutch, when all the pressure is on to do something really big. I also think about that 2012 Grey Cup too, which was pretty special, just with it being the centennial and being celebrated at home. And again, kind of like tomorrow, playing Calgary and pulling off that big win was really exciting.
Yeah, it seems like the last couple of times we faced Calgary in the finals, they had quite the heck of a team, or Winnipeg as in last year, but we always seem to come through when it matters the most in those final games.
Absolutely.
Can point something out really quick. So I found out this stat looking at the game notes for tomorrow night's game. Calgary has beaten Toronto the last 16 appearances since 2014. They've won 15 of them, so they're 15-1. But they lost the one that mattered, which was the Grey Cup in 2017. So, if we had to win only one game against Calgary, I will take that game.
Yeah, we've had some issues with Calgary in the past, that's for sure. But that's why I kind of deem it tomorrow as our redemption game.
Hey, Ken, before we let you go, what are your keys and thoughts on the Argo game against Calgary tomorrow night, and what do you feel they can do differently than they didn't do in their 20-7 loss to Calgary a couple weeks ago on the road?
Well, our defense has really got to step it up. I'm seeing that we're 8th in the league in yards passing against. So maybe if we can cut that down a little bit, and of course keep Chad Kelly in that game and in the driver's seat, would be optimal.
Nick, any final thoughts for Ken before we let him go?
Yeah, kind of. If we're just going to bounce on going off the same question, I think what's really interesting when you look at how they played in that Calgary game, it's not like the year before where they got slapped something like 40 whatever to 2 or something. Like it really got derailed just because of that Chad Kelly injury and then having to kind of go backups in for the rest of the game. But when you look at it defensively, what's really interesting is that, yeah, the yardage they've given up hasn't been good, but we see this from Jake Meyer a lot, not just against Toronto, but across the league. He seems to have this tendency where he can rack up really good yardage, but I don't think he ever threw the ball more than 10, maybe 15 yards down the field once. He seems to get yardage and first downs, but they never seem to be able to punch it down in the end zone. And a 20-3 loss kind of epitomizes that, because it's not like they got crushed. If Chad had stayed in, you got to think that they could have at least put one more touchdown and have made a closer game out of it. So it'll be really interesting, I think, coming up tomorrow to see, assuming that, of course, Chad is healthy the entire game, whether or not they'll be able to drive down to punch some more points in on the board. And then if the defense plays the same, I think they got just the same chance of winning on the other end, like 27-20 or something like that.
You're 100% right. If Chad Kelly was still in that game, I fully believe we'd be talking about an 8-0 Argo team right now. I just do want to add that I am actually back on radio here in my local station. It's called Whistle Radio. It's on 102.9 FM. It's out of Stouffville, and I'm going to be with my co-host Joe Moyer, coming up in September, and our show is called Sports Timeout. Thank you so much, guys, for having me on here today. It's been quite the pleasure. And you know what? I've actually not been going on live at all since I started podcasting, so this is a new feeling for me, and I totally appreciate that from you guys.
No problem, Ken. And again, where can my audience watch and listen to your podcast show again, just to plug your show?
Yeah, well, I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. That's the easiest spots to watch me. Spotify, iHeart, Deezer. I do the Buzzsprout, so all the main ones that come from that area. But they're the main ones right there. Thank you.
And what's the best way of somebody contacting you, Ken?
Well, they can pick up a phone. If you really want my cell number, you can have that. But you can just message me, or you can send me a message at Ken's Corner Podcasts at gmail.com. It's probably the easiest way.
All right. Well, Ken, I want to say thank you so much for coming on here. And after our show's done, I will send you a video and audio copy of our show. And when's our show airing too, Ken?
I was just asking my editor the same thing today. They're actually taking off on a flight to Italy next week, so they're in the middle of packing up, but I'm pushing them to hopefully have it out by tomorrow, Chris. I was actually very hopeful for today, but I'm thinking we're going to be tomorrow.
Okay, and I'm definitely looking forward to your next show, Ken, and also having Nick on your show at some point. And Ken, we'll definitely have you back on here again, and I hope you liked the StreamYard. I think StreamYard is better than Zoom, and it's a great platform for shows.
Yeah, I love the way it looks. And Nick, I'm waiting for you. Just send me an email of your timetable when you're available, and I will accommodate you as soon as possible that you can be ready for us.
Sounds great. I appreciate that, Ken. I look forward to joining you. I'll make sure to get in contact with Chris as well to help. And fortunately, my schedule tends to be pretty light. If it's not when I'm working and it's not during an Argos game, I'm usually pretty free. So, we'll arrange that pretty soon.
That sounds good. I don't think I have anything ready for release next week. So if you're that free, then let's giddy up and let's get her going.
Amazing. Thanks again, Ken.
Have a great day, and let's go Argo. Sorry, Chris.
Thanks, Ken. And again, that was Ken Judge from Ken's Corner Podcast for coming on here tonight. And Ken, thank you so much, and go Argos, and we'll talk to you soon, bud.
Yeah, let's give it a big Argos. Have a good day, guys.
Argos.
There you go.
Okay.
Good night, boys.
Good night, Ken. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Nick, thoughts on having Ken Judge on our show tonight?
I think longer. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, it kind of makes up for missing 2 weeks ago with David Morisuti, getting to kind of bounce off ideas and having a shared perspective on the game. Another voice in is always really exciting to have. So, and yeah, now I'm really excited to making arrangements to be on another show with him as a guest. It's a lot of fun, and that's what I found is really cool at this community. Just getting to share interests with other people and sharing enjoyment of things like the Toronto Argonauts, for instance.
I was on a podcast last night with a gentleman named Ray from Nashville, Tennessee, and he loves the Canadian football. He grew up watching it in Nashville on ESPN2, ESPN3, and he doesn't know why more Canadians are not proud of their league. He loves, obviously, he loves the NFL being in the States, but he loves the Canadian Football League. So I was on his show last night for 30 minutes or whatever. It's on YouTube if you want to check it out. And we talked Canadian Football League with him and how he got into it as well.
Sounds like we got to mail him some Argos merch later on.
Definitely. So, and I'm going to try to get him some contacts as well. But yeah, I love doing this show and connecting with people. And David came on a couple weeks ago. He filled in for you. Don't worry, you're not being replaced, but he was a great guy. And then tonight we had Ken. And then last week we had Sean Bowen on as well. So I'm going to work on Nick, try to get some more guests for our shows in the future as well. And this is already our 6th episode in this new format.
Yeah, and we're already halfway through the season. It's a little weird for the Argonauts because they've spent 3 of them on the bye week and have ran out of them already, whereas some have only spent 1. I don't know if there's a team that hadn't spent any yet, but I think the Argos are at a little bit of disadvantaged position as they run the gauntlet. The one positive thing about it, though, is that of the 10 weeks coming up, their farthest they have to travel is west to Edmonton, Winnipeg, and then all the remainder of their games are within the Eastern Division, and that makes Montreal the farthest, which isn't really too bad. If you're in a struggle, you can get there in a day.
Absolutely. And that leads to our first question tonight, Nick. What are your thoughts on the matchup with the Calgary Stampeders on Friday night at BMO Field? And Calgary's pretty well had our number since 2016, except for the Grey Cup. So thoughts on the matchup, and do you feel the coaching staff, Dinwiddie, Corey Mace, etc., are going to have some new wrinkles in for the Calgary Stampeders team tomorrow night?
Yeah, I think so. I see this as, I know some people don't see it as quite important because still 7-2, but I think this is actually quite an important game because they're coming off their last bye week. I think they've played most of them, if not all of them, at home right after. They have a 6-0 record, I believe, what I saw on the game notes at home, and they're playing a Calgary team that, beat them, but it wasn't like they got absolutely dismantled like last year. It was kind of a lack of offense with the injury to Chad Kelly. So they've got a lot of proof that they can take it to this Calgary team that's had their number over the last couple seasons. I think this is a game where they're really going to fire high on all cylinders, especially in front of a CNE home crowd, which is typically brought even more energy and excitement to games than we've seen some other times that they play throughout the year and even in past seasons. So for them, I think it's going to be a really key thing, and to really channel that energy, the CNE emotions, and to really bring it to a Calgary team that's had their number. They should be fired up to try to get a win out of them.
What kind of a crowd are you expecting tomorrow night? Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend the game, but I'll be watching on TSN. But what's your prediction for a figure for that game?
Well, part of the good news is that they did end up opening up the northern side directly underneath the scoreboard. There's some temporary seating. Yeah. So I know the middle 2 sections they've opened up, which is probably around another 1,000 in each, 500 maybe we'll say. So there's a good amount there, an extra 1,000, which I'm hoping will mean we're around the 15,000 mark. And the team's done a really big job in promoting this game. So I think, although we don't have the upper eastern side open, I think we're going to have a very good attendance for this game by Argo standards, and I think anything above 15K would be a huge success.
What time are you going to be getting down to the game with?
So for me, I was lucky enough, thanks to my amazing people at Goldline Curling Supplies. We have worked incredibly hard over the last week, and fortunately, both myself and my brother were able to get tomorrow off. So we are going to spend the whole day down there, which is so much fun. I highly encourage anybody, when it's a CNE game, you absolutely have to take advantage of it. You got to go down as early as you can. The ground's open at 10. You don't have to be there that early, but when you get there early, there's less lines to deal with. It makes it easier to get food and go on rides and things like that. There's all kinds of really cool confections. Some of them this year have been a bit more disappointing. I hate to say it, but there's some things that are really, really good. Like if you get a chance, you got to try that holy moly cannoli with veal and hickory sticks, and wrapped in a cannoli with some sprinkles. Like it sounds weird, but it is insanely tasty. And there's some all the normal carnival classics. I think of the roasted corn, the turkey legs, corn dogs are some of my favorite because they when you taste those, you can never go back to a pogo stick. They taste horrible by comparison. So it's just makes such a really fun day trip to really enjoy it and milk the experience. There's something for everyone when you go down there, and getting a football game for $10 after $25 admission is pretty good if you look at it in that perspective. So you gotta go early.
Have you been to the CNE this year, or is tomorrow your first time?
I happen to go during the Warriors Day Parade. I've tried to make it a tradition the last couple of years when we've gone, and in the past, the Argos have made it easy because that's normally when they have their game. But this year it was a little bit later. But it still worked out okay. The Warriors Day Parade was a lot of fun, and it's always really cool to show appreciation and respect for members of the armed forces, people past and present who have given their lives for our country. It's an important thing that I think we value as Canadians, and it always means a lot when everybody's out there and shows their respect and support. And yeah, and using it to be there early to scout some of the sites and try some of the foods before it gets too busy later on in the year is one big advantageous thing as well.
Are you going to try the cheeseburger ice cream?
I did. I actually tried that the last week I was there, and surprisingly, it was not the worst thing I had there. If you guys follow me on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, I always do a CNE themed food blog post, whatever you want to call it, called Small Eats CNE, and I try to go through as many weird, strange things too that I see and try around, along with myself, my brother, who's a pretty big foodie as well, and my mom. We always try some of the strange things and some of the normal things. So if you get a chance and need some recommendations on what to try or what to avoid, give that a look. I think most of my fellow Argos fans, though, will be disappointed to hear that Franz is not there this year. So the Thanksgiving waffle is not available, sadly, and do not have the Thanksgiving poutine in its place because you will be severely disappointed.
Is there, for anybody that's listening or watching that are beer drinkers, what would you recommend at the CNE?
So there are a lot of good places to try your favorite beverages. There is a Western themed bar west of the food building. There is a beach bar. I think it's I didn't go there this year, but I think it was Muskoka Brewery beers. It's west of the Intercare Center. My always go-to place is the Jazz Bar that's right in the middle of the convention center. That is one of my favorite places to go. They've got a really good selection of craft beers. You can get a bottle of wine for $45 if you don't want beers. There's also another little mini bar just east of BMO Field, kind of tucked away in a corner outside, which is also a nice place there. You can also get craft drinks from that one. If you're looking for places to go and drink, I would go to the Jazz Bar because you get some sort of craft beers that you don't normally get. I'm not too big on the sort of overly corporate stuff of like, Coors, Bud, Molson.
Mhm.
It's always nice to treat yourself with something that's a little bit unique.
Definitely. And do you and your brother do any rides at the CNE?
We used to. We don't so much anymore at the CNE, but I do want to consider maybe giving the new Ferris wheel a try. The old Ferris wheel is there as well, and you can kind of see it for comparison then, which is nice. And it's probably around, I guess, about 50% higher up, maybe a little bit more than the old one. And the old one still is kind of open top, whereas the new one is like you're in a kind of a closed pod, kind of like some of the ones in London. So if you're worried about just kind of the open air, that fear of heights, it might be a bit less intimidating if you're kind of closed in. So or it may not if you're claustrophobic. I don't know, but yeah, I might give that a try. But for me, rides have been more kind of a Wonderland thing, more or less. Now we've kind of outgrown the CNE rides.
All right, and we're going to get back into talking the Toronto Argonauts. You mentioned before, Nick, Calgary's really dominated this series since 2016.
Mm-hmm.
They've also won the last 3 head-to-head matchups and are 5-1 in their last 6 games. I don't like to go back to 2016. And what are some of the reasons for their success against the Toronto Argonauts, specifically the last couple years?
Yeah, there's a number of things that could maybe play in a factor of it. Back then, of course, Calgary was the best team in the league, and I think we've seen it differently now in more recent years of just sheer dominance across the league. I think what probably has a big factor into it is that there are guys like Ryan Dinwiddie and Corey Mace who came out of that Calgary camp. So there's a little bit of that animosity or that belief to prove that, like, what systems your opponents are playing and that you can do it better. And Calgary has had good defensive players, especially guys like Micah Alway and Cam Judge, who have really, and Dustin Rose the last week against Toronto, guys who have really been able to have their sort of standout game against Toronto and really shut them down defensively. And I mean, the last game was a little bit hard to say because of the injury to Chad Kelly. It absolutely would have made a difference if he had have stayed in, and I understand the reasons why you didn't want to if you're Dinwiddie, just in case, because you don't want to lose him for the whole year. But those kind of things do play some major factors in, and that whole offense stagnated them. I would attribute it mostly to defensive play, and just, I guess, reading their minds and knowing what kind of plays you can expect from Dinwiddie and Mace and being able to counter that.
Absolutely. And we also got some former Argonauts on the Calgary Stampeders too, Marquise Ambles and Shaq Richardson, and who are some other key players on that Stampeders team that we should keep an eye out for Friday? Yeah,
well, Ambles went back to Calgary. He'll be playing against us this week. Jamal Campbell play probably, but he's now on the injured list. Mills is playing. Dietrich Mills, so Kadeem Carey is going to be sitting off, so that's a guy to watch in running back position. One of the guys I think you can never Paredes, and I know he missed the kick last week to win their game, but Paredes has come clutch more often than not and is easily one of the best kickers in CFL history and has a proven pedigree. So especially in a field like BMO where wind is always a factor, that's another big guy I would consider watching on this Calgary team. I think if we're kind of flipping it on its head now and talking about some of the weaknesses, I think it's going to be arms. I mentioned Jamal Campbell, but they also lose Bryce Bell on the 6-game injured list this week, which is a huge loss. And I don't think their offensive line is quite the same tier they were when they were in Western Finals and winning Grey Cups back when Bo Levi Mitchell was with them. So I think that's a weakness, and potentially the DB core. Toronto struggled Chad Kelly made that one big pass down the field, loss, which was their only big touchdown, but they don't seem to do. They didn't seem to do much else against them, but I don't think their Calgary secondary is quite as good as Toronto's receiving core. So I think you got to kind of challenge them throwing the ball down the field more.
I was going to bring that up with you, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's thinking, oh, yeah, obviously I want to establish the run with AJ and Andrew, but I really think the Argonauts, if I was thinking like one of their coaches, I think it would be simple to go with the running game, get that going. But I think the Argos and in this game, I feel in the first quarter, I feel they're going to try to attack Calgary secondary, going with the deep ball. And then once that works, they'll start getting the running game in there as well. That's how I think they're going to attack Calgary in the first quarter.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. I hope to see the same thing out of it, because I think you can go right for the jugular there really early in the game. We off with some dives or off tackle runs, and they'll throw that swing or screen pass kind of early on to just stretch the field a little bit. That doesn't go for very much, but I think there's definitely an opportunity there where Chad might be able to go deep really early. And we saw in the moments that Chad Kelly did play that game, Calgary was really aggressive with their D. They threw in the blitz packages really early to try to get Toronto in the second and long situations in those 2 or 3 drives that Chad Kelly started. So I think you're going to probably see that out of the Calgary playbook again. And the best way to counter is if they're going to throw everybody in on Chad, have everybody run all flies and throw deep, because that's kind of what happened and that Ottawa did to them early in the game 2 weeks ago when they Ottawa ran all flies, the Argos blitzed, and boom, in a one-on-one, Marquis Campbell's got beat. So Royce Metchie, I think it was, my mistake. But yeah, that's I think the kind of thing you got to do.
And Ken's still watching us. He said, "Thank you for having us on tonight." Well, thanks, Ken, for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to having you on his show as well. And okay, we're gonna get to some other keys. What are some other keys for an Argonaut win against Calgary? Obviously, to me, one of the keys is playing a clean game. Avoiding turnovers like they did the last time, and I really feel Javon Leake is going to try. I think Javon Leake's got it in his head about that Calgary game, and I really think he's going to be a factor in this game. And don't be shocked if he has another either a kickoff or a punt return for a touchdown in this game.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Leake had that. There was that moment where they drove down, they could have scored, but they threw in a play that turned around that game at halftime was Javon Leake fumbling that return. So yeah, especially in front of a home crowd, with the wind that benefits returning and some of the blocking is gone. I think he is definitely going to look to break some big ones. He's the guy who leads the league right now in punt return yards and has 3 touchdowns. So he's definitely a big guy to watch for in this game. If I can say one more, the kicking situation for Toronto. Right now, John Haggerty is in as a game time decision. He was kind of the big injury question coming into this week because he didn't practice much with a nagging knee injury. Because not only does he do the punting duties, like we know Boris Beatty can punt just as well as Haggerty, but the big question is he's the holder normally. So do we see Haggerty dress and just hold for Beatty, or do we see him get swapped out last minute for Alfredo Gachuz-Lozada, the other global kicker they have? Because I think you still need to field 2 global guys. I may be wrong with that now, but it's going to be an interesting conundrum for Toronto to have if there becomes questions in the kicking game coming in.
That should be something to keep an eye on. And I didn't know about Haggerty, so thanks for letting us know about his status as well.
Fortunately, while we're on the kind of the topic of injury reports for the Argos, the good thing is Devontae Coxey is coming back in. So he's in on the left side wide receiver spot right now. What do I have it here? Yeah, Jeremiah Hadell is returning back to the practice roster, so that's kind of where the substitution is. There are some questions. I think that Ungerer might have not played as well, but it looks like he'll be good to go. So we pretty much have as good a receiving core as we're going to have, given Ambles is gone now. So everybody who's kind of, I think, the first string offense, really good to see.
I'd like to see them get Curly Gittins going. I know he had a good game against Hamilton, and I know he's had some rib injuries this year, but he hasn't had a 100-yard game, and I'm just hoping they can get him going as well. They've obviously had Unger going, they've had Coxie going, Daniels going. It would be nice to see Curly Gittins Jr. have his first 100-yard game of the year against the Calgary Stampeders.
Yeah, now's the time to do it. I would love to see it as well. Go Golden Hawks.
Absolutely. And I also feel AJ Ouellette is going to have a great game as well. So I think Leak is someone to keep an eye out on. AJ Ouellette and Curly Gittins Jr. And for the defense, I would say keep your eye out for Winton McManus. That's my gut feeling on him.
Yeah, McManus always has a solid game. The guys I'm kind of thinking I'm looking at is the secondary. Robertson Daniel in that last Calgary game had led. He broke an Argonauts record and I think was either tied or one short of tying a CFL record with 16 tackles. You don't want your halfback to be leading that statistic, but given the injury to Pickett as well, it kind of forced their hand. What I'm really interested in seeing is the secondary play because Meyer has not been a very consistent quarterback.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you this as well. What is the latest on Maurice Cornell? He originally was supposed to be back middle of July, end of July, and I don't know if he's going to be back even this season.
Yeah, sounds like still nagging injuries. So I don't know what the issue is, if it's sort of the same thing continuing, but clearly he's not 100%. But what we've seen is sort of the benefit with this Toronto Argonauts team is that they have the ability, the depth to rest guys, which like if Stiggers hadn't have broken out and being such a big corner, and Robert Priestju, who are both on the injured list as well. Jamal Peters is back, and we've seen Amos, Daniels, and Mechie kind of be the guys in the safety halfback slots. So if you didn't have guys step up like that, I think you might have tried to see them rush him back in and potentially risk re-injury. But because they've got the depth, that they can take it easy with Maurice and really let him not play until he's 100% good to go.
Absolutely. And this leads to the next question. What are your thoughts on Calgary quarterback Jake Mayer and head coach Dave Dickerson? And the Stampeders have not had a losing season since 2007, and the record is 3-7. But this is actually a huge game for both teams because Calgary does not want to go to 3-8, and the Toronto Argonauts are only like a game and a half ahead of the Alouettes. So this really is a big game for both teams Friday night.
Yeah, the Edmonton Elks in your rearview mirrors, you're probably heading in the wrong direction, which I completely agree with. Thank you, Ben, for saying that. But I think I've kind of said it before. My thoughts on Mayer, I'm still not quite sold on him because you're getting in from this offense. You're kind of seeing, again, not entirely his fault when a lot. But you're seeing a scheme that's really throw the ball 5 yards down the field and just get first downs, but not be able to punch it in when you need to. And it kind of falls right into the trap of the Argos exact style of play. They're going to say, we'll give you the 5-yard chippy pass all day long because you won't be able to throw the ball down the field without getting picked off. And what we kind of saw in that Calgary game, especially once the two plays kind of went Calgary's way and they took, you didn't see Calgary really try to throw the ball deep. It became a really boring game because they just took what they were given and really just killed the clock. So it's a good strategy when you're winning, but when you're losing, it's not going to win you games. And that's part of why they've only got the. So I think if you're going to have to take a risk probably and throw the ball downfield if you're Calgary, but Toronto secondary and linebacking core as a whole is probably one of the best in the league, next to maybe BC or maybe Winnipeg. So, deep trying to do that there and not against.
Yeah, Calgary does not have the offense to keep up with the Argonauts offense. So Calgary's best way to win is to try to have a game like they did a couple weeks ago on the road, because there's no way they're going to beat the Argonauts scoring 30, 40, 50 points. They're going to have to. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say Chad plays really good at home, keep in mind. I think they've scored 30 points every game at home so far this year. So it's going to be completely different than being on the road in Calgary.
Absolutely. And this leads my next question. I asked Jim Barker about this, but I want to ask you this, Nick, too. Do you feel the Canadian Football League is doing enough to protect the starting quarterbacks with all the injuries to the starting quarterbacks through the league this season?
Oh, that is a difficult question to answer. It's tough because, especially from the Argos perspective, we've gotten called for roughing the passers, which have been, brushing his helmet or his face mask and it getting called. And yeah, by the letter, the way they're calling the rule, they've called it. Or you see scenarios where the quarterback is clearly running and doesn't, because McManus puts his shoulder on his head while making the tackle. It's a penalty. So I think, the league is doing everything they've done in their position to try to prevent injuries and to quarterbacks. And I don't know what more you can do from a league perspective at this point. Like, you look at the injury to Bo Levi Mitchell, the head by some egregious dirty hit, like what happened to Fajardo or somebody. Like, it was just or Nasoli I was thinking of. Just a football play gone wrong, and we've kind of seen that across the league. We saw that with Kelly's injury. We saw that with Vernon Adams' injury. We saw Zach Caleros maybe a little different too, because he's had that concussion history. So it's like, I don't know what you can do more to rectify that, because you can't do any more from a penalty standpoint, and I don't know what you can do for like or a 1-game suspension is going to. I think you just kind of have to just keep enforcing it the way you are. And I mean, there's other years where guys don't get injured. Like last year, we only had 15 quarterbacks played. 23. So it's like, I think it's just a year right now where quarterbacks have been inconsistent for most teams anyways. Because I think the only team left who hasn't had a backup play is Calgary. So yeah, I don't know what else you can do to protect quarterbacks with the way the rules are without making it just two-hand touch on them.
By the way, I want to do a new segment with you, Nick, and I wanted to get your thoughts. I'd like to do one every show because it is the 150th anniversary of the Argonauts. And on this date, August 31st, not quite August 31st, but August 31st, 1988 at Old C&E Exhibition Stadium, one of my favorite running backs, number 6, Gil the Thrill Finity, set a team franchise record with 215 yards against the Calgary Stampeders almost 36 years ago today.
Bring one in with, especially with Calgary. I'm not sure AJ Ouellette or Andrew Harris will be able to break that record this week, but it'd be fun to see them try. Really outstanding record, and really cool to see it happen at the old CNE Stadium too. I really wish I could have been to see a game there.
Well, it's only 5 minutes from the current stadium, and they have markers for the Blue Jays there, but they don't have any for the Argos. And it's like the Argos played at that stadium longer than the Blue Jays did, and there was 12 Grey Cups on that site, 3 Vanier Cups on that site, so much history on that site. And to me, they should have goalpost markers or some plaque saying, hey, this is where the Toronto Argonauts played from 1959 to 88. In Pittsburgh, where they tore down Three River Stadium, they have the 20 and 30 yard lines marked on the parking lot. to remember
Mm.
Three River Stadium for the Steelers and their history. And I think Toronto needs to do a better job of recognizing their past history as well. And hopefully one day they'll do that at the site of where the old exhibition stadium is.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time the Argonauts get thrown under the bus for teams that don't win anything but bring more bums in seats. So I don't know.
All right, we're going to wrap this up with two more questions. This one I wanted to ask you, Nick. Did you expect the Montreal Alouettes under new ownership to be 6-3 at this point of the season? And what are your thoughts on head coach Jason Moss's job he's done in Montreal so far with that team?
Yeah, well, I think sort of contrast with what Ken said and we were talking about. I think Montreal is they've showed after kind of a slight slip out of the gate, they have been proved themselves so far as one of the better teams in the league. And yeah, you could say that they've played teams like Edmonton, Hamilton, Ottawa, and pulling wins against those guys, and not necessarily facing the big dogs, but well, they in the gauntlet. But I mean, you got to win against the teams you play against. And how's it any different than when Toronto beats Hamilton on Labor Day and the week after? Is it really? So I've been quite pleasantly surprised, and I think it's a good thing that we've seen, especially with some of that ownership questions, for them to really bring the football culture back into Montreal, and we have seen that happening. So it's a really good thing to see, and I've been really pleasantly surprised. And I've said before, I really like Cody Fajardo, and I think he's been burned a lot in Saskatchewan, just for not having a good old line in front of him. And I think, like, if you're talking, I think Cody Fajardo would probably be one of the guys I would look at after like Chad Kelly or Zach Caleros, probably. Yeah, still some little things that, and I don't think you can underestimate them. They almost beat Toronto, so they're better than I think a lot of people give credit to still.
And my biggest disappointment this year, I'm gonna get hated in Hamilton, but I think the Hamilton Tiger Cats, they got Bo Levi Mitchell. They're hosting the Grey Cup this year, and it's just been a disaster. And I think the loss to the Elks, they hit rock bottom, losing 24-10 at home. And I hate to say it, I like Orlando Steinauer. I think he's a good coach, but I think he needs to give up one of his roles. He either becomes the president and does that job, or he gives that up and lets somebody else take over that position and just focus on head coaching, because the expectations for that team this year were to get to the Eastern Final and get to the Grey Cup again. And Hamilton is regressing at this point of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sometimes shifting getting rid of Tommy Condell and then switching to someone with arguably even more conservative play calling and Scott Milanovich is necessarily the right way to go offensively. And it's tricky too, because Steinauer's in that defensive coach role, kind of different from someone like, say, Dinwiddie in Toronto as an. That's a stir in the pot, but I can agree with you, like, because you brought it up with Jim Barker, that yeah, it's a big challenge trying to do both roles from an executive standpoint and to do the coaching thing. I think it's hard to say just after one game, and especially when they've been plagued by such injuries like the Bo Levi Mitchell one. There is, I think, maybe the potential that they'll have to make some coaching changes in positions and roles after the year ends, because I don't know if you're going to be able to really turn the ship around. It might be too late, but then again, there's people in Edmonton who think if they can string just 3 or 4 wins together, they'll be back in the mix. So anything can happen in the CFL, and that's what makes after this coming up, the Argos need to really bring it on Labor Day.
Okay, Nick, your Wi-Fi cut out. Okay. Anyways, guys, yeah, you're back. It's just your Wi-Fi cut out there. We're gonna wrap up. No, it's okay, and we're gonna wrap up the segment. So next week, Nick, if you don't mind, just bring up a piece of Argos history. I think that would be a great segment to have on our show every week since it's 150th year. Having like on this day on Argos history segment, I think would be great. But we're gonna wrap up our show with our final segment, and that's our weekly CFL picks for this week's games. And I'll let you go first, Nick. You got Montreal, Winnipeg tonight, Calgary, Toronto, obviously Friday night, Hamilton, BC Saturday night, and then Sunday Ottawa to Edmonton, and can the Elks end that 22-game losing streak at home?
Yeah, I know. I know some we've talked about that. It would be maybe different if Montreal was hosting rather than being in Winnipeg. But yeah, I'll take the shot. I'll pick the underdog and go Montreal this week. Obviously, I'm taking the good guys on Friday night tomorrow. While I stuff myself with corn dogs and $45 bottles of wine. I will pick BC and yeah, I'm gonna still take Ottawa until I see it happen at home. Sorry, Edmonton. I do really like Trey Forden. I absolutely think it was the right decision to put him in, but I think Ottawa will have Edmonton's number this week to win on the road.
All right, I'm going to go with Winnipeg, Toronto, BC, and Edmonton. I'm going to go with all the home teams. Winnipeg, Toronto, BC, and Edmonton. I really think the Elks, Ottawa, that game's a toss-up, obviously,
Yeah.
but I think the Elks are going to finally do it. And Hamilton, BC, I really think BC is going to blow them out. And Calgary, Toronto, I have the Argonauts winning by 6 points, 23-17. I think it's going to be a closer game than people think. So 23-17 Argonauts. And then Winnipeg, Montreal, I just think Winnipeg is playing well, and they'll be at home. So I got to go with the Bombers.
Yeah, I think with Winnipeg and Montreal, one of the questions is what kind of Claros are we going to get, because he has been kind of Jekyll and Hyde so far, which is why I'm kind of leaning towards Montreal. So if Montreal loses by 10 or less, I'd be happy to pick that spread. For the Toronto side, like I've said, we've scored really well at home, and I think you might get something like a 32-17 type win for Toronto. I really worry about Calgary's offense. They have not looked good, so I don't see them scoring 20 or more.
All right, and we're going to wrap up this show. This is episode 6 already here on this Thursday, August 24th, 2023. I want to say thank you to everyone watching this live stream audio on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter/X. And this will also be on our 14 audio platforms such as Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. And also the Argo Bounce Live weekly audio show about the Toronto Argonauts is going to be aired on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM in Metro Atlanta, the home of Southern talk and sports. Nick, final thoughts as we wrap this up.
Yeah, enjoy the CNE. Take advantage of coming in early to try some of the crazy food or some of the classic. See me there. I think this week I am going to switch it up a tiny bit and wear the Royal Copeland jersey, the white 77, in the new style. So if you see me, go ahead and Argos, and I love talking CNE food. So yeah, give me a holler, and I'll be glad to talk to you. Some food and talk about that. So and if not, I will see you at the game for sure. And yeah, take huge advantage of it and enjoy it, because there aren't too many days a year where you get a full-fledged day-long experience for an Argos game, and it is just so much fun. So.
And where can our audience find you again, Nick, on Twitter?
At Nick_small_38. I'm also on Instagram under NickSmall38 as well, with periods instead. So if you see me, feel free to drop a like or follow, and I usually try to follow back fairly quick. And yeah, thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the game tomorrow night.
and we will be there Sunday or Saturday, September nights at 1 o'clock for sure. And I will be watching on TSN tomorrow night, and I'll definitely make sure I'm at the Grey Cup game next year as well. But Nick, we're going to wrap up episode 6 of the new Argo Bounce live audio show here. And I want to say thank you to everybody for watching live streamed, listening on audio platforms, and on WQEE 99.1 FM. And thanks again to our guest, Ken Judge from Ken's Corner podcast for coming on as well. And we're going to end this show with our new theme song, the Argonauts fight song. And I have to find out which group and what year that song was created, because I think it's such a catchy song for the team.
Yeah, I have a CD-ROM copy of or something that includes it, among with other so-called Toronto Argonauts songs. But that's the only real Argonauts, I guess, contemporary pop or rock or whatever. But yeah, thanks again to Ken, and thank you, Chris. And yep, take care, everybody, and enjoy the game tomorrow.
You too, Nick, and we'll talk to you soon. And we'll definitely see you September nights for that Montreal game. And thanks again, Nick, for coming on tonight. And enjoy the CNE and the game tomorrow. And we'll see you next week for episode 7 of the live audio Argo Bounce show here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, etc. Nick, thank you so much. Enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you soon. And we're going to end this with the Toronto Argonauts fight song.